Hi everyone, and welcome to Women in Tech Speak Up. Today I've got three great CTOs. They're all award-winning leaders. And so I'm actually going to hand over to each of them to introduce themselves because they can do it an awful lot better than I can. But I think it's super important that on International Women's Day that we are able to talk about what it is that we're good at and who we are. So let's start with Christina.
Thank you, Sarah, and lovely to be here. I'm Christina Scott. I recently joined OVO Energy to run their product data and technology teams. So this is month 5, and I've been in energy crisis mode since I arrived. So it's been a complete whirlwind. Great company, a real sense of purpose. So it's been a really interesting 5 months. Prior to OVO, I spent a lot of time in the media. So I was CTO for News UK, for the Financial Times. I've worked at the BBC and various other places. And in terms of what I think I'm good at, I think in technology, it's really important to understand that the people are key to everything. You need people, you don't need technology. And I've always lived by that.
Perfect. That's what we like to hear. Great. Thank you. Georgina.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. I'm Georgina Owens and I'm the CTO at a company called Liberis. 2 months longer than Christina. I've been here 7 months now. Equally a whirlwind in terms of how quickly it's gone and what we're doing and what we're achieving. I previously was at a sports streaming company, as well as spending a year working with startups and helping to mentor founders. So, yeah, excited to be here and have this conversation today. Thank you.
And a special thank you for turning up, even though you've got COVID. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
So over to you, Nadine.
So I'm Nadine Thomson. I am the global CTO at Mediacom. I've been at Mediacom about 2.5 years. So Mediacom is a media agency, part of WPP Group. And so we pull together loads of data and use technology and creative to help build up some of the world's biggest brands. So with the likes of Dell and PlayStation, Adidas, and many others. And alongside my technology role, I also lead the Mediacom consultancy business, so offering consultancy solutions to our clients. Through my career, I've worked across different sectors. So I've worked in B2B and B2C in international organizations. I've worked with Christina briefly at News UK. I've worked in media, retail, travel, entertainment, insurance, oil and gas, consultancy, and a couple of others. So I've kind of worked in my technology role across lots of different businesses, which has been a really interesting experience. And alongside that, I have a non-executive role on the board of Visit England, so helping steer our national tourism economy and raising England's profile overseas. So that keeps me pretty busy.
So it sounds, wow. I always think it's interesting to hear a bit about sort of your backgrounds and hearing where you've all been and what you've all done kind of leading up to the roles that you're in is also super important. But something that Christina just said around, what's important to her as a leader, putting the people first. What's there for you? What's important for you as a leader, Nadine?
I think Christina's really sort of completely spot on. So I spend 90% of my day, I think, dealing with people and people challenges and pointing people in the right direction and making sure I understand the strategy and talking to stakeholders and making sure I understand what's going on in the business. And I think it depends on, I suppose, the organization as you lead in, what type of organization you as a technology leader work in as to kind of what kind of skill set it pulls on. But I think that people leadership skill is incredibly important. And the other thing that's important for me is seeing more diversity in technology. And I know that I've spoken to Georgina and Christina about this as well in the past. I know they're hugely passionate about this as well. So, I mean, on International Women's Day, it would be remiss of me not to talk about gender imbalance in technology. So 17%, we know the stats, but let me tell you again, 17% of people in technology are women, so only 17%. And when you get to an exec level, there's only 10%. And when we think about how ingrained technology is in our lives, from health, from finances, from transport, from energy, for just our general ways of working to climate change, not having all of that talent and different perspectives and different viewpoints in the room helping shape the world we live in is a miss. And it causes us many challenges throughout the world. And I think that's an important aspect for me, as being a visible female role model and encouraging more females and general diversity in technology.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And Georgina, is that, how does this show up for you, diversity in the way you lead?
Being a woman in technology, we've all experienced being in the minority for a long time. And I think it was interesting that I think for quite a long time, it wasn't something that I actually thought about until other people started calling it out. And then when people do, you go, oh, now I know, now I understand. And so for me, I mean, even today, as much as I try and encourage a pipeline of diversity, all kinds of diversity into the team, it is still really tough. But what I do try and do is make sure that the voices of everyone in the team are heard. And in particular, I think junior people that we're trying to bring into the team, junior diverse people, trying to, if you've got a pipeline of bringing people in, once you get them in, making sure that they, that they're not squashed by the majority, because and it doesn't happen consciously, I don't think it really happens consciously a lot of the time. So it's really educating people who are doing it unconsciously to stop, step back and look around them and look for the people that aren't exactly the same as them.
So what are those barriers that you've encountered? Because you said, it's difficult. What are the barriers that you see? Unconscious bias, I'm hearing, but what else?
I think it starts at such a young age. I mean, it starts in schools, the way that people are raised, the environment that they're in. I mean, media has a lot to play in terms of making some careers look way more attractive than others, and I have an 18-year-old daughter, and trying to talk to her about moving into technology, and she's just like really doesn't want to do it. And I don't think she could really tell me why, other than she just has this feeling that she doesn't want to do it. It's like, I know that wouldn't interest me. It's like, well, how do you know that? Because you haven't done it. So, somehow she's been trained that that's not going to be of interest to her. So I think a lot of it is awareness. A lot of it is probably role models at that younger age. I think schools are guilty. I don't really think that teachers are educated enough to understand what people like us do, and therefore to describe it to their classes as something that they should aspire to want to do.
I think it's really hard for teachers too, because the industry's moved so fast in the last, so much as you look back 20 years ago, it's night and day. Things have changed so much when it comes to technology. And if you've been a teacher all that time, then it's kind of appreciating some of those changes and understanding how technology is used in industry and what the roles are is quite a difficult ask. But I completely agree. I think I'm building on what you were saying, Georgina. I think it's parental expectations that boys go into computers or computer science or IT rather than girls. And that is shifting, but it's shifting slowly. I think it's the education system. I think that then we get less women coming through to universities, maybe studying computer science. I think you're right, the media has a role to play. The imagery of the nerdy computer scientist, which I don't think any of us are, I'd like to think anyway. And so I think there's a lot of different aspects, which makes this, I've spoken about this issue a number of times. I know we all have. There's no silver bullet. There's lots of different things we do either in the junior level to try and ensure the pipeline, what Georgina was saying about inclusivity and making sure when people land in the team, they feel welcome and that they stay in the team and you don't bounce people out again and then kind of end up having a very, a team that looks and speaks and feels all in the same way. So there's lots in there.
Okay, yes, no, totally. And Christina, what's your view in terms of how, how stereotypes have maybe shown up during your career?
I did a panel this morning and I had to think back, and actually, I mean, horrific when you look back, when you're as old as I am and you look back at how it was. So from, when I started in consultancy, so my second job was consultancy, we weren't allowed to wear trousers instead of a skirt. Unless the partner of the project approved it. I mean, can you imagine? And we actually got, I remember soon after I started, we got a letter saying that we were now permitted, but only with partner permission. So you weren't allowed to wear a trouser suit, which is just crazy. And then if you think about, and if you think about so much behavior that was just very normalized. So whether it was inappropriate jokes or whether it was talking over women in meetings or assuming that in a meeting a woman was more junior, so many behaviours that were just really, really normalised that actually I only feel now we're really beginning to address some of those behaviours and people are now speaking out and calling out bad behaviour, and that's of both genders. And so for me, and I know we've been talking about this for years, Nadine, same conversation for years, but for me, the glimmer of hope in the last few years is actually it's stopped being just women talking about this.
Yeah, that's
and actually true. A lot more men and allyship, and there's a lot more broader and inclusive concepts coming in, which gives me some hope that it's going to change.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point, actually. It takes courage to speak courageously about this topic and actually be able to call it out when it happens. So, what gives you that courage?
I think what gives you that courage is belief in yourself. And it's hard. It's hard for people to, and particularly women, we know, find it even more difficult to have that belief and that self-confidence. I think once you've got that, then you're able to call out other people on potentially bad behavior or things that you want to see change. But I really do think that's what gives you that courage.
But I think we have a duty as being more senior to call out on others' behalf as well. So it doesn't have to be. So if you spot poor behaviour, and I ran a session on this in my last company, and it was probably the most attended session we ever held, which was calling out bad behaviour. And actually, a lot of men were really interested in exactly the same topic, and we just shared tips for actually how do you do it. You can do it with humour, you can do it by taking someone to the side. There's lots of different strategies to call it out, but actually it's not just the person it's applying to. Actually, I think everyone has a duty of care to call it out.
Right. So it's taking responsibility at each and every level within the organisation to support those people to actually be able to call it out. And what I'm hearing is actually this role modelling, but also standing up as the person that you are, to stand in the belief that it's the right thing to do. So Nadine, what gives you, or what has given you the confidence that Georgina was saying to be able to use your voice in this way?
I think it's not, well, on the confidence piece, I think sometimes you don't necessarily have the confidence to call that, to say something or speak courageously, but I think it's having a conviction and a passion means you kind of feel compelled to. And I mean, sometimes you call something out and you're not confident about it, or you might speak courageously about a topic and don't feel confident about it. I think it's really important when you do that to appear confident about it, because I think it really impacts how your message is received. I think for me, I would agree with what Christina and Georgina said. It's conviction, it's self-belief, and yes, the confidence to do it. And I think sort of a responsibility at a senior level to be the people that can speak courageously, because we're in a place where we've navigated a number of obstacles in our career, and it's given us a platform where people will sometimes listen to us more, or we kind of care less. I'm not sure which one it is, but both sometimes. So I think that is kind of an obligation for us as senior leaders to do that.
Yeah, I'm actually getting something from you. So what's the worst that's going to happen? From where I am today, what's the worst that's going to happen if I call this out? And being able to actually be okay with saying, actually, yeah, it's the right thing to do.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So let's move on then to this feeling of vulnerability that you've kind of brought up here by saying, even if I'm not feeling courageous about it, it's still the right thing to do. So when have you each felt vulnerable during your career? What's happened to you that's kind of given you that feeling where it's feeling uncomfortable?
So I looked up the meaning of vulnerable earlier, and it said exposed to the possibility of being attacked or harmed, either physically or emotionally, which I think is interesting. And I reflected on this, and actually I felt quite vulnerable yesterday when I was called into a meeting with two of my peers from the executive team, and suddenly they were asking me lots and lots of questions about why was I doing this, how was it? It was to do with recruiting some product people, and it's like, how are you doing this? Why are you doing this? What are you doing? And I got at the end of it now feeling ill. I was probably not at my best anyway, but I was like, oh wow, I just feel like I've been beaten up. And rather than dwell on it and think, oh God, am I doing something really wrong? I just immediately messaged one of the two and just said, I feel like I've just been beaten up by you. And he was like, oh my God, that's not what I meant at all. He said, I had a really bad night's sleep last night. I'm sorry. And he said, I know I can be a bit blunt. I said, that's fine. But, just realize. And it was as quick and easy as that to get over it. Now, a past me probably would have, spent all day dwelling on that, thinking about all the things that I should have done differently, about all the things that I should be doing differently, as opposed to just like immediately going back to the person and calling it out, and that just resolved it. And as you see from the way that I described it, it wasn't the way that I perceived it to be at all.
You bring up an amazing point here, which is obviously when something happens, the quicker we can deal with it, the less power it has over us, because we don't start playing it out in our head. And obviously, that you said, this is something you did before, and it drains us of energy when we allow it to, and being able to take something and have the courage, like you say, to actually recognize it, stop. So yeah, that's really interesting to hear how you deal with it. And what's it for you, Christina? When have you felt vulnerable?
I would say for me, it's where there are things that are out of my control, and you really can't do anything about something happening. So I worked for a company that went into administration, and we knew the company had gone into administration because we had TV screens everywhere and we saw it on TV. That's how we found out. And then it was literally everybody out. And going from working for a company that you were really passionate about and you really believed in to actually you've got no job was quite a shift. But also as a manager, you had loads and loads of people who were looking for answers, and you didn't really have answers. And so I think I did some brilliant training recently around resilience. And what that did was you took different things that had happened in your lives, like really bad things. So my dad dying, for instance, and you looked at what were the positives in that situation, and you went into this thinking there are no positives. How can there be a positive, you know, in something like that? And actually you had to look at it in terms of relationship positives, financial positives, career positives. And when you stopped to look, you kind of went, well, I have actually got a strong relationship with my mum now. Or, you know, this has happened, or and whilst they weren't trying to say that something awful like that is ever going to be a good thing, you can still recognize that there are bits of opportunity and learning, and there are things that you can gain from it. And I found that really useful to actually look at, and particularly in those things that actually you have no control over. They just happen to you, life happens. And how do you cope with that? So I highly recommend to anybody looking at that sort of resilience training, because I think it's difficult to cope with things when they're done to you.
So how did you recognize, or how did you ask for help at that point? When you recognize, oh, this is all outside of my control, what was it you turned to?
So the help, so I was 6 months pregnant as well, so it wasn't ideal. So the help I got was from other people who worked for the company. So it really brought us together. We actually ended up taking the holding company to court because they knew it was going to happen, didn't pay any redundancy. So actually, out of that came some really strong friendships, and you know, we all looked out for each other, and we were looking for job opportunities for each other. So I think there are always some positives that come out of any situation, and you just have to look for who are your support network. It might be friends, it might be family, it might be colleagues. You know, who are the people that you can turn to in those situations?
Right. Okay. So, I mean, touching on this point is kind of like vulnerability, as I often say, is courage in disguise. What we feel in our most vulnerable, people are actually seeing us showing up usually quite courageously from the outside, but what it feels on the inside is often this discomfort that we all have when something is going on. So how does it appear for you, Nadine?
Well, it's interesting. I think I feel vulnerable like all the time. Like I'm always questioning, am I doing the right thing? Am I making the right decision? I think there's obviously times where I feel more vulnerable than others. But I really like Christina's points on resilience, because I think, you can't control things. I completely agree. You're going to kind of need to bounce back from that. But also going through a career, particularly if you're doing a career in tech or whatever career you're doing, you are going to constantly fail. And success is only kind of born about from a million small failures that on the millionth time something works. And so resilience is super, super important. Along with, I think networks are really good one. So having a network you can turn to help for reassurance, perhaps in a particular area, or just as a sounding board. I think that's really important, but the personal and the professional network. And sometimes I see those two things do blur, and I think that's also really really helpful, as having an understanding of your professional environment and also being able to bring a personal element to it.
Yeah. So you touch on something which obviously, how or who has supported you during your career, and obviously having this network, like you say, but who is it for you? Who supported you most during your career?
I think my mum and my dad. I mean, I have to show them recordings so they get a mention. No, but in all seriousness, they instilled a confidence in me that I could do anything, that I could be a brain surgeon if I wanted to. I'm not sure I'd be a great brain surgeon, but that's beside the point. I think so for me, they have been huge. They've been my biggest advocates throughout my career. Always believed that I could do anything, and I think that's really important. I suppose if we go back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, diversity in tech and getting more women or diversity in general into tech, that parent influence is actually really really important. I mean, aside from that, my network, my partner, there's been a number of also mentors and sponsors through my career. So sponsor being an advocate and a mentor being more of a coach. And I've had a number of those in different industries, different roles that have really helped me at different points of my career.
Okay. And who supported you most, Georgina?
Same as Nadine, really. I mean, my dad died when I was quite young, but my mum's always been an absolute rock throughout my life. I mean, she's just incredible energy, and done so much stuff. So, you know, she's been a role model for me. My husband has helped a lot. We made a conscious decision between us that one of us would always be at home with our daughter. And she's 18 now, and so we did that, and I kind of did the early years and he's done the later years, and you know, we made some financial decisions on the back of that. And I think for me it was a really good decision for us to make, because having that one half there who's sort of stable all the time, you know, especially in the roles that we've got, where you've got to work late, you've got to travel, you've got to attend functions and things, you know, I think that was a really good decision that we made. I know not everybody is fortunate enough that they're able to do that. I've never had any real specific mentors or coaches that I've sort of spent a lot of time with, but network, definitely, a network of people, like-minded people, has always been really strong for me.
Okay. I mean, Georgina is the reason we've got this together, and she was explaining to me about what you ladies have. So, Christina, what is the value of having a network of, like Georgina was saying, like-minded people that you can share with?
So I think the wonderful thing about those sort of women in tech network that we're all kind of part of is that egos are really left at the door, and you don't have to pretend that you have all the answers, and there's nothing kind of off limits in terms of, I really need help or advice about this, or, you know, this has happened, or, you know, I'm looking for a new job. Anyone got one? So, you know, I think it's nice, because I think sometimes you get networks where it's, you know, all about who's most successful, and actually this really isn't that. It really is, we're there to help each other, and you may not be hugely active all the time, but when you ask for help, you get it.
Right.
Yeah.
So actually, sorry, just knowing when to ask for help, step one. And then asking into the group, so where you know you can trust that you're not going to be judged, that other people are there to support you.
I think that's the important thing, knowing that you can ask for help and you're not going to be judged. That's really the key thing about this. And I love what Christina says about leaving your egos behind, because that is so true. That really is so true, and that's so liberating as well. You know, that you can just like be yourself and be really authentic. And I think that's really critical.
Yeah, well, and I like that in terms of being able to support one another, and obviously creating a space where you can show up as you and not feel like somebody else is going to say something that's going to, you know, make you feel worse when you're obviously going there to ask for support. So what you've all touched on this in terms of talking about success, but how do you actually define success for yourselves?
So I would say my definition of success has probably changed over the years. I think I probably used to think success was getting to a certain level, but actually it's really not. And I would say that when I was looking for the job I currently have, I had a checklist of, you know, what I wanted from a job, and it wasn't, I have to be at this level in a FTSE 100. And actually success is it going to make you happy? Is it interesting? You know, everyone has a different, you know, financially, everything, everyone has a different level of success. And the hardest thing is probably being really true to what your level is and what you want, as opposed to what the given stereotype of what success is. And so I think really sitting down and saying what's important to me, and that's not going to be the same as, you know, is important to Georgina or Nadine, because we're all individuals. And so I think everyone's success is different.
So giving yourself permission to define what success means to you, step one.
Yeah.
Georgina?
I'd agree completely though, Christina, with you. You know, when I was interviewing for this position, there was a number of different positions that I interviewed for, and you know, would get so far into the interview and just know that was not a company that I wanted to work for. You know, and I kick myself because some of them I should have just left the process earlier, but it's quite hard. It's quite hard when you're in a process to actually leave it, because you kind of want to keep going. But I did get better at that, and I think I agree as well. You know, you're very focused at a certain stage in your career. You're very focused on level, and I guess that's just because I don't know why we're encouraged to think that level is an important sign of success, whereas actually it's not. It really isn't.
So actually being able to move away from the stereotype of what success should be, and we get to a certain stage and realize actually there's more to it than just, you know, how much money I earn, what my job title is. Okay, Nadine, what is it for you? What is success for you?
I think a similar sort of vein of answer. I would agree. I went through a similar journey of kind of going after the job title, going after the roles, going after the company, and then I think you do get to a certain level and actually realize that there's more to life. And for me, it's sort of loving what I do. It's I love creativity, I love problem solving, and I love I want to do work that really keeps me interested and I enjoy. And it's also knowing that I've changed things a bit for the better, and that might be through some of the work I and many of the I mean Georgina and Christina do it as well, in trying to get maybe more women in tech, or other, you know, other areas of things that we do to try and improve the world, and I suppose technology, using the technology lens to do it. So for me, it's having a real balance of I love the job I have and I'm enjoying life, because I mean it's finite, so knowing that you're making the most of your time, that's probably success. And I wouldn't have given you that answer 10 years ago. I probably would have said it being a global CTO for X company, but I suppose that's, I don't know if it's as you have gotten a bit older, or it's just I'm a bit late to the realization of what success really is.
I think it's actually really interesting because quite often we go for the stereotypes to a point where we've got, you know, the normal makeup, and you get to that point and then it's like, well, no one tells me where to go from here. It's like, you know, I've reached this level, now what? You know, so I love what you're all saying is actually success is changing over time, how you feel, and giving yourself permission to let that change and to be okay with what you were. So I'd love to know what each of you think has helped you succeed in the male-dominated environment.
Persistence.
Self-belief.
Just complete and utter resilience. Christina said, not letting anyone beat me down, and destroy my confidence in myself. I think that's really the key things.
I'd say definitely the self-belief piece, and I think that also helps as, I don't know, I think as you get older you do get a bit more confident, a bit more happier in your own skin. Maybe that's a generalization, so not for everyone, but that's definitely been my journey. So having confidence in what I do and knowing that I'm good at what I do, I think that really helps. And I think just being me, and I think that's, you become more comfortable. I've become more comfortable being me in the last sort of decade or so, and I think that really helps as well.
I think also picking your opportunities well, and if you've picked wrong, get out.
Picking quite quickly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, don't, you know, if you go for something, it doesn't work out, it doesn't matter, there's lots of opportunities. And so actually what you want to do, or what I want to do, is I want to work with people who are nice, who are supportive, I like, you know, and actually the environment's really important to me. And so I know there are some companies I just want them to work in because they don't have the right culture. And so I think a little bit of it is just being a bit careful about, you know, who you're working for, are they going to support you, and making sure that the environment's right for you to succeed. And don't sit there for 17 years in something you don't like.
I think we all make missteps. Like, I think it's not, I know kind of all our personal journeys, and I know we've all made a misstep somewhere along the way. I certainly have. And I think it's kind of, that's okay. I think I learned a lot from the missteps. But I would agree, like, don't sit there for years on the misstep, make the change.
Right. So you've all at one point during this session actually alluded to this point, that actually the environment and the culture that you're working in has got to support you and what you need to thrive. You know, Georgina was saying when she was interviewing for different companies, and you're saying actually it's really important that, you know, you feel safe and secure there, and that you can, you know, you can contribute in a way that's powerful for you. I love that. Okay, so what would be your advice if you could give any advice to your 10-year-old self? What would it be?
I think for me, it would be not to worry about being different. And so I think as a 10-year-old or a 14-year-old, a 15-year-old or a 21-year-old, actually conforming seems quite important. So everyone tries to be the same. You see, I look at my kids and they all dress the same, and, you know, they try and fit in. But actually what you tend to bring in value is how you are different often. And so I think the earlier you can embrace that, the better it is.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. What I would add to that is don't sit back and wait for it to happen to you. Just go out there and make it happen, and don't worry if the first thing that you choose isn't the right thing. Just, as Christina said, react quickly, move on, try something else. So, you know, just be brave.
I mean, I would say sort of self-belief, have confidence in your abilities, and I would say to myself, you can do so much more than you think you can do, and say yes to things and take risks, because it won't always work out, but 90% of the time you'll land on your feet. And so that's, I sort of look back, I wish my 20-year-old self knew that. To get back to 10, wow, I could have been a leader of the free world. Missed opportunity.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I've got an 11-year-old daughter and 8-year-old daughter, so I'll be going off to pass on your advice to them. Thank you. But I love these kind of conversations where actually you're willing to be honest, actually vulnerable, share what it is that's important to you, because to me, stories are what's going to change the world, and, you know, encourage others to do the same. And you've all brought this up through, you know, diversity inclusion in terms of, you know, how important it is. But maybe let's change then, just for the last question, as to how has DEI actually positively impacted your careers?
Shall I go?
Yeah, I'm thinking. I'm intrigued to hear what you're going to say.
Well, I went to a conference this morning, Future of Utilities, and there was a sea of men in suits, and so naturally,
yeah,
you know, I look different, I stand out, and so there is a benefit in being in the minority, and sometimes it doesn't always feel like it, but actually there is. Because you get noticed, you can't help but get noticed. A number of times I've walked into things and wanted, you know, the room to swallow me up, because it's been full of people who don't really look like me. But, you know, whatever your differences are, whether it's education, gender, faith, whatever it might be, actually it makes you that more interesting. And so take that opportunity to be different.
I think it's really nice. I think people do remember your name, they do remember you, because often you do really stand out in the room. I completely agree with that. I think, I mean, going through much of my career, I mean, D&I initiatives weren't really in place for a lot of my earlier career or majority of career. So it's more been recent times. I think perhaps what D&I maybe does for women is maybe levels the playing field a little bit more. So it might get people onto a shortlist. Doesn't get them the job, but it gets them onto a shortlist, which then might give them the ability to showcase at an interview how amazing they are. With maybe in the past, without D&I, it might not have got them onto the shortlist. So perhaps it's just helping even the playing field a little bit more. I think that's what I see of many of the initiatives today, and also making better cultures. Actually, that's one other thing I would add. So just going back to Christina's point about choosing your opportunities and where you work, it's making us think more about what inclusive culture is, and making us think twice about what banter is and if that's appropriate in an environment, and all these other things that really change the culture of an organization, and I think for the better. So I think that's probably what I've seen. I've seen where D&I initiatives impacted, and perhaps also to some extent have impacted me.
I think the awareness that comes from all of the initiatives has been great for all of us. We probably wouldn't have met if it hadn't have been for a lot of for the events that have been put on by other people. So that's one of the big benefits. The growth of my network, and the gender diversity that I have in that network has come from a lot of these initiatives. So, and it's given me the opportunity to meet some amazing people, and also to have a platform to encourage other people as well. So that's, for me, the biggest benefit.
Yeah, great. So I guess it's just one last question as to what is it that you're each taking away to do differently based on DEI and taking the next step in terms of inclusion?
I don't think it's really anything particularly different. I think we've all been doing it for quite a long time. It's just continuing. I think what we have to do is make sure that, and I've seen this happen, right, is, oh, you only got the job because you're a woman. It's like, no, please don't start with those kinds of comments. And it's making sure that it doesn't tip, the balance doesn't tip the wrong way. So it's hard work to keep with the message, and to I want to say reinvent the message, because I think we do have to keep reinventing the message to make sure that it's effective. I think that's really important.
I think we've got a lot of D&I programs here at OVO, and actually what I can bring is, because I've been involved in lots of D&I programs in different companies, and actually I can bring in learning experience, things that have worked, things that we've tried. And so I think that all helps, because a lot of it isn't new, as Georgina says. A lot of this stuff, a lot of us have tried different things, and it's great to share what works or what you might try to move it forward. And so I think you just have to keep going. I've come to a different company, there's things that I've tried in other places that will work here as well, so it's worth doing that.
Yeah, I think we're all changing the world one woman at a time. So we're all out, doing our thing in our organizations, our things in our networks. We mentor, we sponsor. I mean, there's a fantastic group of women in tech that do so many different things, and I do think it is ongoing, and I don't think there's anything particularly new. One element I do think is important, it's not new, is the measuring the data. And I think having data through what's happening in an organization is incredibly important, because you can't manage a challenge that's invisible, or that people perceive as actually not a problem because they're not looking at the numbers. So I think that's important, but that is not a new statement. That is just my sort of thing that I'm most passionate about today.
Great. So it's having data so that we can, measure actually what's going on. It's continuing to have the courageous conversation and potentially reinventing it so that people are still listening and still recognizing that the challenge is ahead, and also sharing, like Christina said, between different organizations. But I think we'll end on that, what Nadine just said. We're changing it one woman at a time. Just amazing. I think that's what this International Women's Day stands for, you know, making those small changes, helping people really stand up and be themselves and be the change that we all want to see. So thank you so much, ladies, for sharing your experience, being vulnerable, and yeah, just having an honest discussion about what's really there. Appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.